Hi everyone, my name is Emily Vang, and this is my discussion post for March 24th. So, this week's reading was focused on mental health within the Asian community, particularly the ways that it has been stigmatized as taboo, and the ways that Western psychotherapy has also failed to thoroughly be culturally sensitive to many Asian cultures' way of approaching mindfulness and well being. The article from Milner et al. Had such a wide selection of unique experiences from various Asian Americans who wanted to maintain cultural closeness while also being able to advocate for themselves. One of the stories that stood out to me was Javed's story, a young Afghan man who was being pushed by his parents to be in an arranged marriage. Javed refused to take his former therapist's advice of simply cutting off his parents and instead questioned his own neo-colonial view of an oppressed marriage while also validating his own feelings of disapproval. The article says that Javed identified a respectful way to approach each parent, rehearsed how to validate their concerns, offered his alternative problem solving plan, and expressed his needs. Milner et al., 2021, page 339. This reminds me of my own experiences with my parents regarding mental health, my disapproval of their traditional gender roles, and other conflicts we've had where we had to both reach an understanding. They had to understand that I was emerging as my own person in a country where those norms were not as widespread. I had to understand that their concerns are rooted in their connection to the Hmong culture and that they ultimately thought they were helping me. However, one criticism I have is the language used when describing Javed's story. The excerpt said his former therapist had bias against his cultural norms, which makes me reflect on the way ethnic minorities are given this sense of protection for their harmful cultural practices under the guise of respecting tradition. I did not like how it was portrayed that the therapist was in the wrong for their perspective, and the implication that the therapist had that view because they were racist, culturally insensitive, etc. I have also seen this similar sort of language employed by well meaning people who want to protect culture in their eyes in my speech language pathology classes. In class, we had a case study scenario where a mentally disabled teenager from a culture that regularly engaged in arranged marriages was being told that she would get off her IEP immediately after turning 18 and would become a housewife. Her parents decided that she would not get a job at all and that she had to marry the man that they chose. The so called correct response was to let this happen, but as someone who has that dual identity and oppression of being both a woman and a person of color, I just could not agree with this decision to be compliant. As health professionals, I do not believe it is morally just for us to just turn the other way simply because an ethnic minority is engaging in their tradition and we are afraid to challenge those norms. Throughout the Milner article, I was agreeing with much of the sentiments, but I just am unable to come to terms with how much we are told by well meaning white liberals and our own people that we should continue to carry on these harmful practices. There is a way to deconstruct neocolonialism, but that does not mean we have to continue with our own harmful traditions. For me, I don't believe that engaging in such practices makes me feel connected to my culture. It only makes my identity as a woman more salient and makes me realize that women of color are always left behind in these conversations. The sentiments about collectivist values mentioned throughout the article are well meaning. But again, when we speak of collectivism, we must be critical and reflect on who is actually putting that labor into the collectivist culture. Is it the men who often sacrifice their careers and personhood to raise children? Is it the men who often have to shoulder the mental and emotional weight of relationships and the difficult conversations that come with it? Overall, I appreciate the article, but I think we need to be more critical when observing our own cultures as well. One question I have is where is the intersectionality of these kinds of conversations advocating for a continuation of collectivism? For example, for women, queer folks, disabled individuals. And is this idea of collectivism simply a guise to continue to put the labor on only some folks while able bodied, heterosexual, and cisgender men continue to engage in harmful practices?